Hello, everybody. Thank you for watching. This is the Goldman Sachs presentation, part B of the oral assessment. I just want to go ahead and start by saying my presentation is here to the left. So when I briefly glance over to the left, it is just to make sure that I am at the right spot, telling you the right things. So without further ado, I will no longer leave you waiting. Let us begin with this presentation. Goldman Sachs. Now, for a brief introduction on Goldman Sachs, I thought it'd be a good idea for myself because we are getting into ethical dilemmas to be able to parlay over their mission statement to everybody watching. And their mission statement briefly says, "We aspire to be the world's most exceptional financial institution." Now, there are a lot of big words in there: aspire, institution, exceptional. These are the kind of slogan words that Goldman Sachs has used for years and years and years to become one of the most successful financial firms, but not without its ethical dilemmas and hiccups along the way. We're going to start by briefly giving some background on Goldman Sachs. That way, you have some sort of knowledge about the company if you are not familiar that it is we are talking about. So, Goldman Sachs, established in 1869. This is a almost 200-year-old financial firm. This was here before the likes of any World War, of any Great Depression. This was here longer than anybody who's been alive for. This is a staple in the American marketplace, Goldman Sachs. The two ethical dilemmas that we will get into, as you can see on the screen, are the 2008 housing crisis, I guess you could say, slash market crash as a whole. Dr. Wheeler, I'm sure you know, as you lived through that as an adult. I was just a kid at that time. I had no idea what was going on around me. But doing the research and hearing the part that Goldman Sachs played in this be very interesting to give some more details about that furthermore in this presentation. The other ethical dilemma is the 1MDB affair. Now, this affair was very messy, happened in the early 2010s, and it was with basically a Malaysian wealth fund. And we will get into more of that. It ended up costing Goldman Sachs a couple $1 billion in payouts, something you will see as we go on further in this presentation. And as I have mentioned just previously, Goldman Sachs is the second largest investment banking in world revenue. I'm not talking just national, folks, I'm talking worldwide. It is second in revenue. Goldman Sachs has been around for, like I said, almost 200 years. They are very prominent, very successful. To go a little bit more into it, the 2008 financial crisis, housing crash, Goldman Sachs was a key part because they were selling mortgage backed securities to their investors, to their clients, and then on the back end, selling them while simultaneously shorting the market. So, what they were doing is they were promising that these loans that these people are getting are secure and backed by a secure mortgage rate. Well, on the back end of that, what Goldman Sachs was doing was then selling it at a lesser rate, knowing that they would be off of their hands. And when it goes off of their hands, since these were not actual loans that they knew were not going to be able to be paid, what Goldman Sachs did is then short the housing market, knowing that this would eventually lead to a market crash of all the housing assets. And then from that shortage, when the market did crash, Goldman Sachs profited immensely. They betted against the market because they had insider information based off what they were doing. The other scandal is the 1MDB assisted a Malaysian wealth fund, as earlier, in issuing $6.5 billion in bonds. And what this did is it ended up in the long run taking money out of very successful CEOs, wealth funds, their investments. This was a big scandal with the Malaysian wealth fund to be able to just reap the rewards of a very similar thing as they did here, and they sold very secure bonds to people, their clients, knowing that they were not going to be able to be paid or backed, shorting, resulting in a large sum of money. Some conflicts of interest. engaged in trading practices that benefited just Goldman Sachs, and it was not ethical because it forgot about their customer, treated them as an end to a means and not a means to an end. The ethical ramifications. The 2008 market crash destroyed families. It had a ripple or domino effect, whatever you would like to use, that just trickled down into one thing to another. Families lost their cars, lost their house, lost everything, and some even lost their marriages. Unfortunately, probably some lives were lost too during this crisis. The 2008 financial crisis, while doing more research, was one of the most detrimental things in the development in the early 2000s of the United States, and not only the United States, but globally. Regulatory fallout, which led to an increased scrutiny of financial institutions, and coming from this, stricter regulations had to be made in order to protect the average customer or investor. Not only did these things happen on a global, national scale, this also happened on an interpersonal scale because this completely broke the trust of Wall Street to the people. The people completely, I don't even think now, have regained the trust in Wall Street, and it has now turned into a me against them, from my personal viewpoint and opinion, a me against them viewpoint, all stemming back from the 2008 crisis. Impact on society and the corporate world. As mentioned earlier, Goldman Sachs' ethical lapse in treating their customers poorly have increased financial institution scrutiny. There has been a very heavy eye and heavy watch on the profits of these financial institutions, and you have seen a lot of people stray away from those and go back to their more regular mom and pop, stepbrother, their best friend, those sort of mortgage financial advisors. Public distrust remains high, as already mentioned, and skepticism towards Wall Street practices are even scrutinized today. Today, Wall Street has been moving even faster than it ever has before. And back in the 2008 housing market crisis, this seemed to be the domino that has now even left a lasting effect today. In response, many of these firms have taken strengths to strengthen their compliance and their governance policies, trying to rebuild the trust of the average consumer. Resolution and consequences to these ethical affairs. First, for the 2008 financial crisis, there was about a nearly $3 billion fine, a $5 billion fine, $5 billion for the 2008 market crash, just a small paper cut in what they made that day, and a nearly $3 billion fine for the Malaysian wealth fund scandal. But if you refer back to earlier in the presentation, a $3 billion fine when they raked in $6.5 billion, not even scratching half the surface. So, despite these settlements, these firms remain highly profitable, as previously mentioned, which gives the average consumer a bunch of worries ethically towards these financial firms. They still believe and still have the viewpoint back like they did after both of these instances, probably, where the firms are always going to prioritize their own pockets over the clients and investors' well being. Regulatory agencies have increased oversight. The Department of Government Efficiency has also been a great step in the last few months at auditing and regulatory checkups with these financial firms to make sure everything stands up to par. Some of the code of ethics that I found interesting is it overall maintains a integrity client-based service viewpoint. If you go through their code of ethics, they again and again and again reiterate things like, we do not buy or sell securities when in possession of non-public information. Due to the insider trading, you can see Goldman Sachs, which you can find that exact quote on page 27, constantly refer about protecting people's information. In the future, you want to implement more governance, more auditing, more check-ins. I believe if somebody gets caught in the future doing this, 1 through 10 or 1 through 20 should all be hit with substantial fines in terms of people in charge, and they should be immediately fired and not let work at any other financial institutions. I think this major example would kick into line the ethical, personal, first standpoint all companies need to take. Dr. Wheeler, That is all from me. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and I look forward to hearing your comments, concerns, and questions to this presentation. Thank you so much for watching. Have a blessed day, blessed evening. Goodbye.